Impro Theater and the cast and crew of this online performance would like to take this time to honor the indigenous peoples of the ancestral and unceded homelands we each inhabit, and to consider the legacy of colonization and its far-reaching effects. There is a new Intro to Narrative class from Impro Theater School starting on Saturday, July 9th at 10:30 a.m. That's an 8-week class with the wonderful Ryan Smith. And you can sign up by going to improtheater.com/hashtag online classes, or you can email school@improtheater.com. And on Saturday, July 9th, also at 10:30 a.m., there's a new physical core class with the wonderful Maddie Goff starting. And that is also an 8-week class. Coming up Sunday, July 10th, 2022, starting at 10:30 a.m. for 12 weeks with yours truly is a genre core class. And we are going to work on the Twilight Zone. You must have completed core 1, 2, and 3 in order to enroll. You can email school@improtheater.com, or you can go to improtheater.com/hashtag online classes. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Mike Rock, your host. Thank you for being here for our Pride Roundtable with these rapscallions. Ashley Shine is an LA-based comedy writer, actress, filmmaker, and activist, and she hails from Dayton, Ohio, and she says, "Go Buckeyes" in her bio, and I, as a Wisconsin Badger fan, say, all right, whatever. But Ashley is an activist and an actor, and has done a whole bunch of amazing stuff. And this week, the Book of Queer, her first episode on the Book of Queer is gonna be on television, so that's rad. And we're excited to have her. Oscar Montoya is here. He's an actor, a comedian, and we just found out he's a hip hop dancer, y'all. So maybe we'll make him move his camera back and he is on the new show, The Minx, which is sort of like it's very much a 70s period piece about the creation of the Playgirl magazine and all that kind of stuff, but it's much more than that. And he has done tons of commercials, and he was born in a small town in Colombia, which is also very cool. So he's has made the dedicated move to the United States and to Los Angeles to pursue his dream, and has found it. Rebecca Lohmann is a narrator of 1 million audiobooks, ladies and gentlemen. If you listen to an audiobook, you probably heard her voice. She's also been on recently Perry Mason, American Crime Story, and is one of the voices you hear on Sonder, the Improvised podcast. Joey Rich, ladies and gentlemen, is here. Joey has been on the show, as has Rebecca, has been on the show before. He is an actor, a writer. He's been on Big Bang Theory. Born in Oakland, California, of Mexican and Lebanese heritage, which we talked about during Arab American Heritage Month. And he's also been on Godmother and Mom. And he is here to lift us all up with his buoyant joyfulness. Chris Grace was born in Mississippi. I did not know that. Grew up in Houston, and has done lots of music. There's a lot of musicals in this roundtable today, and Chris has been on a lot of different shows. Oh shoot, the page just went away. I'm sorry, Chris. He has been on Atypical,
Wishbone,
Superstore, Stumptown, and a bunch of other things. And I think Chris and I were in Edinburgh, Scotland at the Edinburgh Fringe at the same time.
probably.
You were there with Baby Wants Candy, and I was there with my sketch group, which is rad. So I don't think we've talked about that before, but maybe we have.
No.
Welcome, everyone, to the show, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
let's take the temperature of the room. How is everybody feeling? What's going on? What's top of mind? We talked briefly before we went on air about this being a week of fireworks. Some people love it. A couple of us absolutely hate it.
Who loves it here?
You mean
In
fireworks?
this room? Oh, I just mean some people in general love it. But
Oh, I see.
yeah,
I love seeing them, I guess, but I don't like the crowds. So I don't know. I like the concept of colored lights. Yeah, I was saying, Mike, I don't know what there is to take the temperature of. It seems like everything's going fine in the country right now.
Yeah,
it does.
especially for the gays.
Yeah, thanks for squeezing in your Pride episode on June 29th. Good luck editing it. You got 24 hours to post this. It turned June 27th. You're like, oh shit, I haven't done a Pride thing.
I knew I was going to be in for this, and I'm taking it. I am taking it.
Actually, you know what? I have a hot take about the recent week, which is that I would prefer if my gay male friends actually maybe take a little step back and don't talk about our marriages right now. There's a lot of like, oh my God, we're next. And it's kind of like, wow, you gave Roe versus Wade like 3 hours of space, and then you made it about yourself. And my hot take is, and probably people might disagree with me, but in my opinion, I think gay marriages are not under threat at all. And I'll tell you why. Because the reason gay marriages happened like relatively quickly, like it was like 2000s, and then suddenly it was like, oh, we can get married. Like it accelerated really quickly. My theory is because there were a lot of wealthy white dudes that wanted gay marriage. And I was trying to think of like when in the history of the US has the US taken away rights from white men. And I can't remember a time that's happened, and I don't think it will happen now. I think they have too much political influence, and thank goodness that we got gay marriage out of it, right? But I don't think that's going away soon, and I just think on Friday I was like, like your first post about Roe versus Wade has to be about your own marriage. Anyway, that's my hot take.
I appreciate that point of view. Ashley Shine, raising your hand. You don't have to raise your hand, Ashley. You just butt in.
I know. I just was like, oh gosh, we're such funny people. But unfortunately, in Texas right now, which I think I'm going to actually pull my short film out of a festival, queer people are under attack where they are publicizing people's personal information in which they can go and attack folks right now. So as much as I want to be like, yes, I echo you. Actually, the only thing I just, as far as this country goes, I don't know if anyone is safe at this point.
Yeah, if I can just jump on that, I would, because the Republican platform in Texas actually says an end to gay marriage, and really because the Lawrence case that said it was okay for gay people to even like sleep in a bed together was a Texas case that went to the Supreme Court. Yeah, they're being very, very clear about it, and a lot of the red states are using that particular, as I think actually the National Republican Party too is using their platform as a template. So I'm not feeling great about it.
Well,
but I do appreciate your hot take is getting lukewarm, but I do appreciate your wanting people to give Roe v. Wade a minute.
I don't know. That brings up a lot of emotion for me as well. I'm in a gay marriage, and I think that it's vulnerable. We don't know what it is. I'm glad that you feel comfortable with it, Chris, and I would like to relax in that. But I think when you relax is when Roe v. Wade happens, right? When people are like, we're never going to get that taken away from us. We're modern women. We don't know a world. I'm 45 years old and I don't know a world that exists like that. And it may not be gay marriage, but it will be like some infringement on some rights in some states. Like abortion isn't banned in every state right now, but it is being taken away by they're projecting 25 states within days, months. And so if you lose rights maybe you have gay marriage, but it's not acknowledged in every state when you cross lines, or your marriage isn't equal to the same amount of rights as a heterosexual marriage, you basically have lost gay marriage in a way. So I don't know. It gets me very emotional and worried about it, because we know that the Republican agenda is to divide and attack, and they are not a fan of white gay marriage or white rich men gay marriage or gay marriage at all.
Yeah, I want to clarify that I'm not coming from a position of comfort. I'm coming from a position of deep cynicism about the way that like power works, and just like yes, I totally agree with all this. Like I definitely think that we're potentially under threat in a whole lot of ways. I just feel like I'll be surprised if like rich white dudes lose something. I'll be very shocked, and so I probably am more like cynical about all this, you know. But yeah, it's not coming from a feeling of comfort or safety.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do have a rich history of rich white dudes being persecuted for being gay. So we'll see if they have overcome it, and if we all get to ride on their coattails. Overcome it.
I mean, I also probably just spend too much time in Palm Springs, where there's a bunch of rich white gay guys that voted for Trump.
No, bye-bye.
Oof.
But at least they have great brunches in Palm Springs.
They know a good mix on a mimosa.
Oh yes.
It's interesting, like now that we're talking about this idea of self-serving political activity in terms of like the Roe v. Wade, this idea of like gay men particularly being like, they're gonna come for the gays next. I mean, they're coming for the gays now. Roe v. Wade affects everyone. It doesn't affect just women. It speaks to a larger picture of self-serving political activism, of this idea of like, well, they're going to eventually come for us. We have to protect us. That's why we're politically motivated to help others, which I think is incredibly silly. I remember when the Black Lives Matter movement started, and then people were like, well, you know, we got to be activated. We got to help our Black brothers and sisters because they're going to come for us next. It's like, what? This seems incredibly narcissistic and selfish, which, I mean, am I surprised in a capitalist country? No, not at all. But it speaks to a larger picture of like, we're always, political activity is a selfish thing. And I want us to sort of dismantle that. I know that it's going to take years of us sort of unlearning a lot of things, and you know, also a complete political upheaval and the end of capitalism, but which is easy. It could be done in maybe a week, right? But yeah, I think it's interesting, this idea of Pride Month being only for queer people. It has always been such an interesting month for me, because it's like, okay, who is this for exactly? You know, as someone who identifies as queer, have I felt included in a lot of like queer things? I mean, when they're corporate sponsored, no, not at all. I don't feel like they're speaking to me in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, I just think it's so funny when people are like, oh, they're coming for us next. Like when Bette Midler famously tweeted, they're coming for the gays next. It's like, girl, they're already they're attacking everyone. I mean, this is something that affects every single person. Like we should all be motivated to act out, you know?
And I think
also,
that's like,
please.
I think that's super important what Oscar's saying, because I have seen, I guess for me, I'm a little over it. I had fun this Pride season for multiple reasons, that I was in inclusive spaces in which those were created by BIPOC people that are family that created those spaces. But also I am tired of the fake activism. Like all of 2020 has just gotten me to be like, what was that? Because now, for instance, my wife is a politician in the city of West Hollywood. She was running for office in 2020, and she just passed with her colleagues for us to have block by block security that's on bikes, and they aren't armed, and they can de-escalate a situation. And it was a 3-2 vote. And for the last 24 hours, we've had nothing but death threats because they didn't get 2 more sheriffs in West Hollywood. But they're like, we're worried about safety. But then the death threats?
Wow.
I'm so confused on how you're feeling unsafe, but then your response is to threaten the only woman of color on the city council and their family. And also, I have a whole film about fighting for your livelihood in the pandemic, and it stars 2 Black queer women. And none of the festivals right now want to talk about it. So I feel as though, as a person that's LGBTQ, unless I do a film that is uplifting and speaks to the people that be, they don't really want me to speak truth. They want me to be funny, be the cute, chubby Black woman that brings us joy, that reminds us of Jackie or any of the other Black legends. But then when it comes to policy, like Oscar is saying, it dwindles down to everybody. It's been happening. And this whole fight or flight thing that we're doing is kind of exhausting for the rest of us that's always been fighting.
Yeah.
The one thing I would like to add to it, though, is I feel like politics are personal, right? It's like women during the suffrage movement fought because they wanted a voice. Gay people are fighting for a voice. So I think when they talk about like gay rights are coming up next, we know it's true. We've seen Thomas has said it. Alito has said it in talks as well. So it is an actuality, and I think it's a way to make it personal when it'd be very easy for gay men to step aside from Roe v. versus Wade, because we're not going to have to worry about it impregnating a woman and having to have an abortion. But when you make it more personal, I'm sure people, even if there's gay men who cared about it, it's going to expand the amount of people who are going to join the fight. And I think that's a good thing.
I do wonder, though, about subdividing and subdividing and subdividing. I mean, the tactic of the enemy is to divide and conquer. So there's this like, I don't exactly know what the balance is, but back in, during ACT UP activism, not everyone, many groups agreed that we needed a revolution, but many groups would have killed each other in the street before we ever got to the status quo and doing anything to change that. So somehow, I mean, to go back to what Oscar said, we have to start caring about everyone else. And it has to start being a concerted effort on everyone's part to unify, rather than to, like, I don't know, like I'm a white, gay, cis woman, right? I mean, I'm not gonna And I'm not ever going to have a kid. And I don't, I've never had sex with a man. And so
Gold
I don't need
star.
it. What was that?
Gold star.
Thank you. But so I don't, what do I care if someone can get an abortion, what do I care? But we have to be more interested in the whole than, and that's not a capitalist way to be. We weren't like raised to be that way. It's
That's
we live in a very individualistic culture.
I think that's a struggle that I think is very difficult to surmount, because I think that there's so many things to be concerned about, and I think it's inevitable that people have the most energy for the things that directly affect them, and there is a feeling of like, I cannot care about every single thing that's coming up, and also reflective of the fact that not to break it into such party like things, but like the Democratic Party is just way more demographically diverse than the Republican Party. So it's just there's many more kinds of people in the Democratic Party that have their own viewpoints. So it's much harder to be like, let's all unify. Even in the aftermath of Roe v. Wade, it's like, I know that the liberals and the left want to basically attack each other more than they want to attack the Republicans. But it's tough because personally, I know for a fact that there's issues about racism against Asian people that people care about, but they don't care that much about. You can see it fall to the wayside, and it's does it annoy me? Yeah, but I'm also kind of I mean, I kind of understand. There's probably third and fourth. I probably have this internal hierarchy of I care about these things most. So summoning up the energy to care about all those things, while it seems like people on the other side are sort of energized and emboldened by not giving a shit about any of us, they just seem so powered and fueled by it. It's a really frustrating thing to see.
But Chris, you got what I will like to say is last year, having that be a hate crime into effect so quickly, that was really impressive. And I feel the Asian and Pacific Islander community really came together and got that done. For instance, for the Black community, it took over 200 anti-lynching bills to come before Congress since the beginning of this country. And that was just passed a few weeks ago in March. So I feel there is lessons to be learned on how the Asian hate, that became a law that, if you get sentenced for that, that's extremely a very long time in jail. And it's really horrible what's going on in that community because the videos are just horrific. But also being able to learn from how everyone came together to make that a law, I thought was remarkable.
Yeah, I would actually love if the people on the left of center side were more strategic about because I would say that sort of mentally I feel very left, but I would say in practice I'm more on the liberal side, and probably because I'm older or whatever. But one of the main reasons I'm skeptical of voices from left of me a little bit is hey, show me how you've won. Let's talk about results. And I think that's a great point of we should be talking about just how do we get the results. We don't get into Twitter beef or anything. Let's just do the work.
And that's a giant tent. I mean, Asia and Pacific Islanders. I mean, my God, that covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can learn from that.
Yeah.
I guess Oscar was right. We solved it in a week.
Less than that, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you, Oscar. It does come down to that empathy issue, I think. Just and that's a combination of an individual choice or lifestyle and and among groups. Chris's point about the Democrats largely being a party of unified separates. Like it's a whole bunch of different people with different beliefs and different needs and wants versus the right, which seems to be in lockstep like a Nazi rally. What? But it does come down to that Martin Niemöller, first they came for the socialists and I did nothing, and then they came for the tradesmen and I did nothing, and then they came for the Jews and I did nothing, and because I wasn't a Jew, because I wasn't a socialist, because I was, and then they came for me and there was no one to help me.
Although I will say, to Oscar's point, that poem might actually be counteractive, because at the end it's like, and no, there was nobody around for me. So that poem is kind of like a selfish.
That's literally, that's like, wait, okay, what? That's what I'm saying about like selfish politics.
It is. However, the lesson of the poem is to say, don't be a selfish asshole. The lesson of the poem, it's saying, the poem is written as though the person has been come for.
I know, but I feel like it should be like, first they came for the socialists, and I felt like an asshole because I should have cared about them. The end. Signed, Martin Niemöller.
Chris, art sometimes speaks in contradictory language. Anyway,
I mean, I grew up super religious, and surprisingly, the person that came to my rescue was my mom. And I thought that would be like the last person, because during the years, I've heard what she said about, the community as a whole. And so,
actually, can I ask what denomination?
Oh yes,
you were
honey,
raised?
Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was a preacher, a deacon. I mean, we went to Red Lobster after church services, which was always good because those, biscuits would be like popping.
Cheddar Bay biscuits.
Yes. But I mean, she came to LA. She was in the Abbey. Honey, I had to grab her off the dance floor. She was like, oh, it's so nice and fun to be gay. And I was like, oh, come on. Let's go. But my lesson in that was sometimes people just need to, like, I feel like I'm very spiritual, and I feel like I chose my parents. And like, I told my dad, because he was just like, oh yeah, I struggle with it even still. And I was just like, and that's why I chose you, in order to show you how to love someone. Because if anybody else comes for me, oh, you got a lot to say. But then if you throw in the shade, then it's like, I was just like, so I'm going to show you how to love unconditionally.
Can I ask everyone how their coming out journey was for them?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Is that okay?
That's true.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Chris, we'll start with you.
Oh. When I was like the actual process of coming out.
Yeah, just like how it
I
was
was
for
in
you.
college. I wrote a play in my junior year about being gay, and decided that over Thanksgiving break I would write everyone in my family a written letter telling them that I was gay.
Wow.
Before I got home for Christmas holidays.
Wow, that was so classy.
Yeah.
And brave. I have to say, super brave to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't work that great.
It still doesn't mean you weren't brave.
Yeah, I mean, my siblings were fine with it. My mom was fine with it, and my dad was like, oh, I'm fine with it. And then like 3 months later wrote me a letter saying, or when I graduated, he wrote me a letter saying that my boyfriend at the time had like corrupted me, who he had not met. I mean, he wasn't wrong, but no, but he was saying he had like turned me gay, and he was like, if you want to correspond with me, don't mention him anymore. And I said, well, then I won't be corresponding with you ever again. And then cut to 2014 when I talked to him again, 19 years later. So that was my coming out process. It was a very like nerdy, like, I'm a writer, I will express my feelings through the epistolary form.
It was definitely very Shakespearean. I like it.
Biblical even.
What I like about doing it in the written word, though, Chris, is that it doesn't open it up for debate, right? You don't get cut off in the middle of explaining yourself
Yeah.
to hear about Jesus, or I just don't understand, or you get to express yourself fully, and they get the time to take it in, absorb it before they speak.
Yeah. And they get something to sell on eBay years later.
I would like to make a bid on that letter.
I would actually I wish I could find those letters. That would be great.
For me, it was very interesting. I found, being from the generation that I am, being an actor, it was impossible in a way to come out because, I went to an acting college, and when we were in school, it's always conveyed, that there were no out gay actors at the time that were admittedly openly gay. I think maybe what's that guy, Rupert
Everett.
Thank you. Rupert Everett might have been like the first one that I had heard of, and then of course his career went down so quickly, and he's like this gorgeous British actor. And so it was very challenging for me because aside from religion and aside from society, I also chose a career that was like a big, huge dream, where it was said, you want to give up your big, huge dream, your thousands of dollars you spent for acting school, you just come out and you've wasted it all. You'll be doing queer theater at the Celebration, for no money, just making, putting money into it. So that was very much in my head, and it kept me in the closet to keep my secret. But what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't talk about like having girlfriends or anything with my family. I wouldn't pretend to be something that I wasn't, but I wouldn't be open about truthfully who I was. And then I think I just started doing it like one at a time because I lived in Los Angeles, so I was away from my family. So I picked like the safest people first. Like I have a younger brother, and I knew that he would love me no matter what. So I went to the people that I knew that would love me no matter what, or would get to love quicker than somebody that might make a big deal for it with me and the family. And then it took like a process, I would say, God, I don't know, like maybe a year to work through everybody. Like, can you come to LA for a visit?
Wow.
I had a moment when I was like 14 when I imagined myself kissing my friend's older sister. And imagining like being on the inside, it was like, really nice. But then I imagined it from the outside, and I just couldn't, it was wrong then. Or like, I too grew up in a very religious family, and like fundamentalist Christian, Bible's true, dunked the whole thing. And
that's what they call it, right?
Dunked.
Yeah.
Have you been dunked yet?
As opposed to, trickled or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I really put it away for a long time. I mean, a long time, meaning I came out in college. But I talked to my mom. My mom said, you don't need to say anything to your dad. You don't have to have the weight of the world on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, fuck the weight of the world. But I left, and I never really, I grew up in Illinois. I went to school in Wisconsin and then grad school in New York. And I just never, like, that was just it. I just never, no one knew me. Like, no one really, I was very close with my mom, but one time she called me in New York. I was in graduate school, and she said, my mom like dripped with sorrow all the time. And she goes, oh, Becky, why don't you give up this gay and lesbian stuff and start singing again? And it was like, I mean, this kind of stuff was like constant. And then finally, my mom died last year, lived with my wife and I for a lot of 2020, loved my wife. never called her anything but my friend or my roommate. My dad called her his daughter-in-law, the one she wanted. Now at a certain point I was like, no wonder she didn't want me to tell him. He would have made her feel like a jerk. So that was a little bit of a surprise. But I mean, I was always out in my life, and I just separated myself from my family and figured, whatever, their loss. It's not the way maybe I would do it now, but whatever.
I like her solution to being gay is just singing.
I know.
Rebecca toured with Grand Hotel?
No, Titanic.
Titanic.
Yeah.
For like a year and a half or something like that?
Yeah. I did the first Broadway tour of Titanic, and it didn't cure me.
God.
It did not.
Yeah, I was gonna,
Didn't hear you.
I wanted to clarify from what you said, were the lesbians keeping you from singing? Was that part of the deal?
Lesbians are notoriously atonal, I guess. I have no idea. But her logic was always so, airtight. There's really no getting in there. I think I said that's a lot to unpack and hung up.
Oscar.
I think I was like one of the people, I just like couldn't hide me being gay. I was like incredibly gay at an early age. I was also a dancer. So, my relationship with my parents were really, it was always a very strained relationship. But I knew that they did not want a very sensitive soft boy as their son, and that's who they got. And I grew up with a lot of fear, being like expressing who I was and being my authentic self around them. So I had to learn to hide who I was at a very early age. I learned how to like mask myself to my family and no one else. I felt weirdly like safe in the outside world, but like when I went back to my quote unquote sanctuary, that's when I felt the most in danger. And I got to an age, I was 17, and I was like fully aware that I was gay as hell. I think is a clinical term. And I was going to college to dance. I was at SUNY. I went to SUNY Purchase for their contemporary program. And I knew that at that moment, I was like, I can't hide this from my family anymore. And I had to come out to them. And I knew that if I did, I was no longer a part of that family. And so I prepared myself. I made a little plan for myself, not in case they would disown me, but I just knew that was going to happen. And that's exactly what happened. So I was very prepared to do that. So yeah, I told them. They took it exactly how I thought they were going to take it. And I left and I never looked back. And a lot of people assume that that's like such a tragic moment or whatever. And I guess in some way it is. But to me, as someone who knew myself very well and knew where I came from, it was the most liberating moment in my entire life. I felt so absolutely free. I felt like there was I didn't live my life for other people anymore. And I could take off that mask. I didn't have to wear that mask anymore. And for someone who literally came home after school every day with such fear of like just intense fear, and constantly being on guard, that's exhausting. That took years off of my life, and to not have to do that anymore, and to never have, I've never had to hide who I was. Never did. It's it's truly the best thing to ever happen in my life, you know.
Oscar, had your family moved to the US together from Colombia?
Yeah. So so my mom and dad moved to the US when I was 2 years old. However, they left me in Colombia when I was 2. And then when I was 12, I moved to the States. So I wasn't really raised by them. And so I was at an age when I was, first of all, gay as hell, clinically, and also going through puberty, and I didn't speak English. So, and felt incredibly alienated by my family members. So that was another added element to the whole thing too. So yeah, I felt like I was living with strangers for the longest time, you know.
And when you went to New York for college, were they somewhere else? Had you
No,
left?
they were in New York. They lived in
You were in New York.
Queens. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you were,
Yeah.
you were at college, but not physically that far away from them when this was
Not physically that far away. No. Yeah.
But
Oscar, when you were-
Oscar, they're missing out on such an amazing human.
Ashley.
No, because I just remember being at UCB and having just you and some other people just have such an impact on me being comfortable and having my voice matter. And I just think that I am sad for them because that's their loss on missing out on one of the most pure-hearted, kind,
I love
funny, gorgeous people I've ever met in my life. So,
Oscar, can I ask you a couple
I love you
questions
so
came to
much.
mind when you were talking about it. The people that raised you from 2 to 12 before you moved to New York, when you came out to them, was it the same situation as your parents?
Yeah, so it's a little bit complicated because I was raised by my grandma and my aunt, and when I came to the States, I lost all contact with that family. So yeah, I never had a chance to, and yeah,
Okay.
unfortunately. So yeah.
I'm wondering if that separation was what was giving you some liberating things, because like when you're raised by your parents, like I don't know, like even when I was so fearful about rejection, I kind of wanted this power of love to overcome any religious upbringing or thoughts that they've been trained from society, the church, government, that gay people are bad and wrong and evil, that their love for me would make them realize how wrong all of that was. So I think maybe it might be different for you to have I don't know, sounds like you didn't have those kinds of feelings because maybe you weren't as tied with them since you didn't really know them till you were 12.
Yeah, no, yeah, it felt like, you know, I grew up with strangers, you know, that didn't understand me and didn't want to understand me, you know. And honestly, to be perfectly honest, the feeling was very mutual. I mean, it wasn't like I was yearning for, you know what it was? Okay, so like I think, so when I was younger, there's a show called My So-Called Life, and in it there was a character named Ricky, played by Wilson Cruz, who is, I mean, an icon to me, because before that, I truly thought I was the only person that liked boys. Like there was no precedent to me. Like I didn't know any who talked about being gay in school besides being a derogatory word, or the idea that it's like this weird fantastical world where people of the same gender like each other's company, essentially. Like there was no proof. I didn't have teachers that were out. I didn't have anyone in my family that was out. Like I just didn't know. So television was the only way I could connect. And obviously I understood that was a fictional show, but I was like, wait a second, there is a world out there outside of this tiny little place that I live where there is a teenage kid, a kid in high school that is dealing with my exact same issues at home, that at school can be his liberated self and have people love him and accept him for who he is without having to hide any aspect of himself at all. That blew me away. That blew me in a way that I was not expecting at all. And I was like, somewhere out there, once I'm out of this prison, literally is what it felt like, I can be like this guy. I could be like this guy. And it gave me hope. And for something fictional, not real, made up, to give someone like me that felt trapped, endlessly trapped, hope, life-changing. Life-changing.
Representation matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anybody else got shows like that like changed their like life?
I feel like you might have, Ashley.
Or a movie or a book or a song or a artist.
Mine was like Noah's Ark and the
Oh!
L-Word. But Noah's Ark had me like up at the gay club every weekend in college, falling in love with drag queens, being like, oh, honey, no. And then the L-Word, I was like, oh, this is more. Okay. Now I'm understanding.
I feel like the representation didn't come out really on television for so long, right? Like it was like whenever you would see gay characters, maybe in the 70s or 80s, it would be like sort of like this unspoken thing. Like people would just like talk about it in innuendo. And I mean, I feel like as a gay actor, whenever I would see something, I would just like drink it in. Like I remember going to see Angels in America, and I was like an actor, young in my 20s, and waiting tables, and I went and saw like rush tickets to go see it, and it's a phenomenal play anyways, but it still was so empowering to see something like that live, or watching the Canada version of Queer as Folk, like to see like men being expressed and nudity and kissing and doing it. It's like, oh my God, this is so like not being shrouded in like the gay best friend. Like even Wilson Cruz, as gay as it was, had all this conflict, right? Where these guys were living, it was about living their life, and any conflict that came in was sort of the periphery. So like I feel like anytime I would read a book or see anything like that, it was more than powerful. I don't know what it was. It gave me a voice.
Mm-hmm.
Also, that was a time period where, I mean, in any form, if there was a gay character, it was like, when's he gonna get AIDS? It was a huge part of like what was important about that culture and the movement and like the movies at that time. Like for me, like I said, I think I agree with Joey that there weren't as many TV forms, but movies were influential for me. So like Longtime Companion was a big movie. Influenced me.
Oh, that was
like I love that movie Broken Hearts Club.
Yeah.
But like in the time, there got to be a point where like if on some like third-rate television show a gay character showed up, by the third episode they would be like, well, I got the test, and it's like, okay, well, this actor had a guest star run on this show.
Yeah, it really was. It really was always like, in a way, it was always like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
And women didn't really get into the, not counting something like Desert Hearts or something that was obviously made not for us. It took a while. And even like the L-Word, I was really glad that it was happening, but I was like, who are these people? Like, hey, I'm here at the recording studio. Me too. You want to have sex in the booth? Yep. I was like, where are these people? I don't know these people.
Rebecca, you're saying it didn't happen like that for you?
and so I was always like, whose fantasies are these? And why can't we be people? Can we just like be, I mean, I don't want to make it boring, but can we just like,
yeah, I
mean, one of my favorite pieces of queer media are Go Fish, which came out in like 1994, 1995, and The Watermelon Woman. And I remember seeing those at Kim's video in the village, like going to the village. Video. But these are fringe movies that were not easily accessible at all, you know? Like you would really have to search. But Go Fish was so transformative in my sort of queer experience because it was so normal. Yeah, the queer experience was so normalized. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like, oh, queer people are like people. They're not avatars for like a bigger picture. They're not metaphors for pain, like Joey was saying, overcoming adversity, you know what I mean? Like they could be flawed. They could be like horrendous, awful people, irredeemable, you know, they're people. And that was a huge impact for me. But, you know, another like just listening to everyone's like, media, it's so interesting. The thing that I think about is like, well, how tragic is it that we see these mediums and the majority of the people that are playing these queer characters are heterosexual?
Right. I was gonna say that. I was gonna say like Bruce Davis and Campbell Scott and Tom Hanks and etc.
Dermot Mulroney and Dean Cain. Dean Cain, who became like a big Republican Trump supporter, was in Broken Hearts Club. That was, you know, but even then, Billy Porter wasn't out, right? In that movie. I don't think he came out publicly till much later after that movie came out. He was just playing a gay character in the movie.
Yeah, like Jeffrey is like Steven Weber, Patrick Stewart, right?
Yeah, but the other guy,
you're right.
Oh, speaking of Jeff, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just like meanwhile the little lesbians were just going to what's the, god damn it, the movie with the last stop at the Whistle Stop Cafe.
Yeah. I can't. I'm seeing her face in my mind right now. Yeah.
Anyway, we had to just watch Mary Louise Parker and Mary Stuart
Fried
Masterson.
Green Tomatoes?
Fried Green Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Not actually be a couple. And we would just go back and like watch it again and again. Like, oh my God, they almost kissed.
Wait, is that why I kept watching that movie?
Oh man.
You just thought you liked Southern food, Ashley?
You just
The whole time I've been thinking.
That's just like, come on.
But the whole time I've been thinking, I was like, I wonder if Chris knows how to fry chicken really good.
You know, one of the things I want to give a shout out though too, because is when Oscar, when you mentioned Watermelon Woman and Go Fish, I remember the first time I saw those movies was at Outfest, and it's such an incredible experience. Like when you're like this gay kid, young, like, and the whole world is straight, and you're like always feeling so condemned, to be in a theater at the DGA filled with gay people, like where you are not the 10%, 15%, whatever the percentages are, that you are, you know, that you're in the 99% in that theater. And to see like that, I remember seeing Go Fish, and it's black and white, and it was like, oh my God, this is just a great love story, right? You know,
I saw Go Fish at the Angelica.
All the people who've lived in New York just sigh at references at New York City references.
There used to be there used to be independent films.
Yeah.
Like now, of course, everyone's a corporate, like whatever. We don't have independent
that
films
part,
anymore.
Rebecca.
All the gay independent films would be at the Quad, in like the East Situation Village, and that was a place where like you'd see movies. That would be where they'd have like Boys Life Part 5, like,
oh my God,
a whole bunch of like short films. And actually, one thing you were saying about the Outfest thing that reminded me of was like one of the bummer things about that whole time period to me was like if you see one of those Boys Life compilations, like some of them are bad, like, and I feel like with a lot of marginalized communities starting to make stuff, it's like you have to immediately be virtuoso at these narrative forms where we haven't told these stories. And it's like the story of a straight man and a straight woman meeting, like not getting along, then they fall in love, and then stuff happens. That arc has been told like 50,000 times. So there's this whole dialogue you have with like all the work that's been done before about it. Whereas when I think all these queer movies started happening, sometimes people would be like, yeah, like, I mean, even I would be like in a room of friends watching like Sordid Lives, let's say. And I'd be like, this is not really for me comedy wise, but like, we're not given as much rope to like sort of like find the boundaries of our own storytelling because we have to do it in like three years.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
There was a joke on Will and Grace once that was like, the joke was something like, we're going to this gay movie. Of course it's bad, but we, of course it's bad, but we have to go. It's like it really did feel like that. Like Timothy Oliphant and someone, what was that one? Timothy Oliphant and
Oh yeah, wasn't it called Go?
I would believe
Go
you.
is a gay movie, but is he
Not Timothy Oliphant.
He is in it, but he's like a villain in that.
Yeah, and kind of a sexy one.
Joey.
Yeah, that concept of over 100 years of filmmaking, but the last only the last 20 or whatever being sort of like slightly more open, the door is cracked a little bit more open to non-traditional or marginalized communities making work, and then the expectation of the industry and the audience of like, okay, yeah, now make a film that that meets the $100 million James Cameron epic that I just watched last week. And
Right.
Oh, you didn't do it? Oh, like instead of actually supporting and saying like, oh, these stories have never been told.
Because the bummer for me is then it triggers like the fake meritocracy stuff of like, oh well, your stuff's not as good, so that's why it's been failing all this time. By the way, Tim Oliphant was in Broken Hearts Club, so maybe that's.
Oh, that's what. Yes. But it was like the ascendancy of new voices. Oh no more independent films.
Mm-hmm. I think I don't. As an independent filmmaker, honestly, I can talk about like the budget, like the way that you're just competing just to get funding is so difficult that it's just ridiculous. But overseas where, filmmaking is basically praised, if you're an artist, they get tons of money like to make their stuff. But here it's like we're all fighting for that one queer grant or that one diversity grant, and it's just like
I would say they care about the arts in general more, because I was in London last month. I had lunch with a friend who's American who lives in London, and he was like, he's Asian, he's queer, he was like, I'm going to go to this workshop where I'm going to write 10 minutes of a play and put it up on its feet in a workshop. And he's like, so I applied for a grant and I got £1,000 for it. And I was like, what? Wow. So he got £1,000 to pay his actors for a
Americans can do that too.
I mean, he did it in a 3-day turnaround. He just was like, yeah, I'll just go get some money for this reading.
Well, I'm glad I'm going to the UK. I mean, they appreciate my art over there. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of nervous about, showing my short on television. But I was like, some other opportunities might come its way just from me going and, mingling with the British.
I feel like that brings us all right back to Republicans again, getting rid of money for the arts, right? That's been a watchword, or whatever you want to call it, a stalking horse. I don't know what the correct word is for them since the 80s. Since Jesse Helms said, I don't know how to define pornography, but I know it when I see it. And the National Endowment for the Arts was completely gutted, and then there was no money left because they didn't like Robert Mapplethorpe. And I literally remember people in the 80s, not to age myself too much in this youthful panel, but I remember people saying to me, oh, you're an actor, you should go overseas. You should go to Ireland, where your heritage is from, because you could make a living and have a career, as an actor there. In the United States, your chances are slim to none. I just want to make sure Ashley gets a shout out. Is it #TMI that
you're bringing to the UK?
So hashtag TMI did screen there in 2020, but this is Sia that will be screening in August.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wait, when are you gonna? You're gonna go for the screening?
I mean, we're about to be in a huge recession, so I'm just gonna blow, some money on this trip. It's probably gonna be my last trip. So
Chris just went to London to have lunch with a friend. So I mean,
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm going to Edinburgh again in like 2 weeks.
Are you really?
Oh,
Oh, that's amazing.
nice.
Yes, I'm just like, where can I go to help restart the pandemic? A bunch of small rooms with no ventilation. And I will say, just as a warning, in the UK they don't care about masks at all. Like, it was shocking to me.
Wow.
It was like going to Texas.
All right, this is good to know because I'm like, ooh, yeah.
Bring a lot of masks.
I want to say that.
B2A, guys. That's the new virulent
It's like keeping up with like
strain.
Gen Z trends. It's
Right,
like,
yeah.
what's the new thing?
Yeah.
Just
Dang.
heard another story about monkeypox again today, for God's sake.
I have a question for the panel, and this is because I see the faces in this panel, and so while Mike was doing the intro, I thought, let me ask a very honest question from my perspective that will probably come off as whining, but I'm curious if y'all have ever experienced this feeling that I've had sometimes throughout my career, sometimes lately, which is like, have you ever felt a separation or like a little bit of distance from like, yeah, I'm in comedy, but like I have a lot of friends who are okay, from the outside, it's like they seem like they're all sort of cis straight white people and they get along really well and they go to lunch together and stuff. And I'm not sure if that's really the reason why, but sometimes there's a disconnect of like, hey, how come like we did that thing together and then like the four of them went and did another project together, and like there was this like social distance that happened. And I of course some of it is just me as an actor being like, why can't I work in more things? But sometimes I'm like, am I crazy for feeling like that sometimes there's this distance that just shows up sort of regularly in social patterns? Does that resonate with anybody?
Yeah, Oscar hasn't called me for anything, and I'm offended. So.
Oscar's just flaky. We all know that.
Drag me, okay.
Yeah, really. I meant this question as an intervention for Oscar.
You took away the veil pretty quickly. Yeah. You took away the smoke screen pretty quickly.
I was sort of having a feeling about. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think so. But I have been wondering a little bit about a few people and just a few straight people who make very straight films, and it would be so easy to ask me to play with them, and they don't. Normally I don't really notice, but the other day on Instagram, I was like, wait a minute. These guys, whatever. We just have to do it ourselves, I guess. But I had something interesting happened to me last week. I wrote a movie about like a lesbian romantic comedy a long time ago, before like you could get married and stuff, when people were constantly comparing gay people to pedophiles and all that. So that went away, thank God. I like put it away for a while because everybody seemed to be being really nice to us. And then about 5 months ago, I took it out again. And I was like, here we are again. I cannot believe this. We're actually much more. Now it's not even that we're pedophiles. We're grooming these kids. So pull it back out. We went and I had the lead leaves the United States and goes to Europe, where she can like breathe for a minute. So it takes place in Europe. So we sent it to this European company, and they came back and said, whether or not they actually said they liked it. They said, we but this doesn't resonate with us. Like, this isn't our world. And so it was like the only people in the world who would probably give us money to make this are like, but we don't call anybody a pedophile. It's a very interesting place. Like, in a way, these kinds of stories are a little bit important. But our country is not going to help out, really.
I was just thinking about what you were saying, Jack, because so many of those European guys, so it's like, are they gay or just European? It's like, I remember I was working with this totally hot European guy at this gay restaurant, and I said, "So are you gay?" And he goes, "Ugh, Americans and their labels."
That actually touches on something that I've also found annoying about this whole experience, is the idea of like, you have to go make your own stuff, which is like, I totally agree with. And I think if you look at the reality of the industry, you do, right? But it's also annoying to be like, I have to go make my own movie. Like,
I know.
you know, like somebody like Daniel Day-Lewis or Michael Fassbender, who are two of my favorite actors ever, I don't think that they ever had to like make their own movie. You know, they just got to be good at acting. And not everybody is like, I can do Final Cut and I can mix my own sound. It's like that's automatically going to limit the number of voices we have.
It's rigged.
And get it exhibited.
And we've if we're trying to raise money like Ashley, then we're trying to go raise money from people. Like, if we're attaching our creativity to wealth, then we're also attaching it to a whole nother hierarchy, which is probably favoring people that aren't us.
Yeah, it was, honestly, it was really hard. Like my last two projects have been LGBTQ plus, and like this last short film, I was just like, it was really important for me to hire people that were in the community and also people that were BIPOC. And I remember people just trying to be like, this will move so much faster if we could just get this person. And I'm like, well, if there is 5 amazing cis white directors or director of photographies, I'm sure we can find 1 or maybe 2 BIPOC with maybe not a huge, beautiful resume, but also their skill set may just be really up there. And people were so mad because they were just like, it was the no. And it was just the boundary of being like, I understand that this is a great story, but I wanted to also be from an authentic place. And if I'm sitting up here saying, hey, we need more voices and people behind the scenes telling these great stories and recreating this world for us, and that look like me and resonate like me, I'm sure they're out there. But it was annoying. And I'm so grateful because even yesterday I was filming a feature film, and I remember packing my makeup and everything in this bag because of the trauma over the years of just not having all of that. And when I get on set, and when I got on set for even the Book of Queers, there was 2 Black makeup artists. Yesterday, the woman, she did my makeup flawlessly, and there was a person there to do my hair. And I felt so silly that I still came with my emergency backpack of stuff.
That's the trauma, Ashley. That's exactly that trauma. I
remember when a friend first told me about that concept of a brown person shows up on a set and there isn't makeup for them, and how, you know, ridiculous and embarrassing and shaming and shitty that is. Man, that's heartbreaking.
It's really hard. And I when I first came here, I heard, oh, your skin is perfect, you don't need much. And now I know what that means. Honey, we just don't have your complexion here, and I'm not going back out to the store. But it's just been really affirming to be like, I wanted that on my set, but also seeing the priority of now Hollywood also recognizing, hey, let's correct this. Because
Absolutely.
the expectation is when you get hired for a job, you should be able to do that job, not make someone else feel like, well, you can't do that job. Well, you know, I was Black before you hired me. Like,
Well,
that's a change.
also for you, Ashley, then it becomes your job where you're like, okay, well, my job is performing, and I guess also makeup artist too. And I think also I have to point this out. This has happened in the last 5-6 years. It's not that it's brand new having
Like
Black
it's
makeup
2
artists on
years.
set.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
feel
mean?
like it's 2. I feel
Right.
like in the
Even like, I
last
mean, I was
2
being, you're right. I was being way too generous with 5.
Yeah.
How many years have Black people been on camera? The fact that it has taken this long to have people be like, well, you know what? Maybe we should have people behind the cameras who are POC, who are other,
Mhm.
and have input in the creative process. Like, I think that there, again, it's that weird, I think working on set and like having experience there is this weird thing that happens where people want to take credit for everything, right? Like where it's like one person needs to be in charge of every single process, and that idea of collaboration is really sort of frowned upon, you know, where it's just like, oh, my idea is the best idea, I'm going to push this idea. And we're so slowly, I will emphatically say so slowly, moving to this idea of collaborating, or at least being aware that like, oh yeah, we need to put diverse voices behind the camera.
Unless it's The White Lotus on HBO, and then in case one white guy writes the whole thing.
Oh my God.
By the way, to your point, is like when Insecure came out on HBO, I remember there being all these articles that were like, Insecure is the first show to have a DP that knows how to shoot Black faces. And I was like, this is 2016. Like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
To Ashley's point about the frustration of dealing with people in production, people in positions of power and decision making, or in Ashley's case, it sounds like people that were cooperating in decision making, and then just like that example of in the moment, on the ground, during the course of production, opting or trying to opt for expediency instead of actually inclusion, and instead of actually doing the work to look at people's reels, to read people's resumes, to ask, you know, friends for references and that sort of thing. And because that all takes time, and that all takes effort, and that all takes actually giving a crap, going for expediency and saying like, well, I happen to know that my, you know, cisgendered straight white male friend so-and-so who's a DP is available. So, you know, it's just frustrating to hear that, and that desire for you know, opening up grant money and you know, Rebecca's example notwithstanding, foreign money to get creators that are marginalized to get support and get what they need. It's a battle, and it's something that it just needs support. It needs fighting for.
So Mike, to your point.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Well, my wife is a television director, and she, a few years ago, she started directing full time, let's say 10 years ago, or maybe a little more. So toward the beginning, that's a dog, it's my dog. Toward the beginning of her of her being a full-time director, she had been a script supervisor for a long time. She was getting a lot of work, and so then she was on somebody from one of the like women's the diversity program at like Sony or Warner Brothers or whatever, called her to consult with them, you know, to find people. So she's taking this very seriously, and she's like trying to find people. So she goes to a meeting and they go, we have these episodes and we have to give them to like people of color or women or whatever. So we can't find anybody. So will you do it? And she's like, no, I won't do it. What? No. She's like, it was sort of like, can we pay you with this money for this episode we were already going to give you? She's like, no, I know that there are people. And then, so, I mean, she did like give a lot of mostly women and women of color have like gone, through her somehow. But about the collaboration thing, she's very good. I mean, you can trust me. She's very good. When she has pilot meetings, she's very nice, she's very collaborative. She is like the last person to take credit. She doesn't get them. And they'll be like, she just didn't seem confident, or she just didn't seem, all these things, which it's just absolute bullshit. Because meanwhile, I know tons of guys who will just be like, I'm the guy, I'm the only one, I can do this, this is how I'm going to do it. And it's all just complete bullshit. I think everyone just has to bullshit, but that's bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there is nothing more dangerous than straight cis white male confidence. If only we could have just a little bit of that.
Honey, I'm trying to have that for the rest of my life.
It is just like,
I was gonna say nothing
sense
more
of entitlement,
but nothing more effective.
Yeah, but can't we just can't we just make a world where humility is actually like I don't know, uplifted,
rewarded,
honorable.
Can't we just be like, together we can do this?
I think you can find that in New Zealand, but definitely not here.
where the hobbits live. You can find that in the Shire.
I mean, I brag to people that I grew up with a really strong bullshit detector, but what it really is that I grew up hating egomaniacal assholes. And I was, I had my share of bullies and etc., because I was an actor kid maybe, or I don't know why, or because I had too much empathy or something. But like, I would say to people like, I don't have a good feeling about that person. But what it was I don't have a good feeling about the fact that person is such an entitled elitist asshole. And I'm talking about like when I was a child, like I was seeing that. I can't even begin to imagine what it's like to be, a queer or non-white or, a person who grew up in poverty, experience running into those same people that I ran into. If I felt that way, it's an exponential, feeling on your.
Mike, I can tell you what it's like. Once my first, I dated him for a while, and he was such a big talker. And when we finally did it, I remember looking at the clock, waiting for that shit to be over. And one day he asked me, he was like, do you like having sex with me? And I was like, no, not really. It's like, you don't know what you're doing, but you talk like you knew what you were doing. And so I just don't understand what's happening. And then he blamed it on me. I want that type of confidence.
But I just also want to say, Mike, we have to imagine it. We have to at least try to imagine it.
Yeah.
Like we have the sort of like the least we can do is imagine it.
Oh
yeah.
Believe me, I do.
I know. But I just wanted to respond to the can't even imagine thing, because we just all have to imagine it.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's hard about that feeling is that that entitlement or the arrogance. One thing that makes it hard to recognize is that it also will rhyme or sound a lot like what you think whatever industry you're trying to get into also thinks of you, So you're trying to separate like, okay, this guy's saying like he doesn't think, or like, you know, when I went to New York and they were like, well, you can get cast as like a gangster or something, or if you learn martial arts, you can be cast in something. Is it that one person telling me that because they're just not dumb or they're realistic, or is it like an industry telling me that? And when you're first starting, it's like, I wish that we all had that detector, but if you're in something you don't really know, you're a little bit like, they must know what they're talking about. They're part of this whole world. So I don't know how much of that gets ingrained in ourselves. Actually, I was going to say, when we were hearing everybody's coming out stories, I think it's so great that like even I felt like sort of emboldened by like, oh, my dad didn't talk to me for a while or whatever. But I also kind of grieve for like us not having the choice about whether we wanted to, like, your option is you tell your family and they're going to disown you. So it's amazing to make that into like a positive thing, but like it's kind of like that's a survival tactic. And there's whole like entire halves of our lives that were like not available to us.
Mm-hmm. And Oscar, that's just an incredible amount of trauma too. It happened when you're 2.
Oh, yeah.
It happens when you're 12. You know, like, my God.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think as queer people, or however we choose to identify, I think trauma is built into our existence.
True.
And it is our journey is the dismantling of that. It's the dealing of that. It's confronting that trauma. It's relating that trauma and how we relate to the world at large, to a globally cis heterosexual world, you know? And yeah, that is tough too, because our queer experience we're not a monolith. It's just by talking about our coming out stories, it's not the exact same experience. The queer experience is so varied, so different. It's such a shame that we don't have that built-in support to tell our stories into a larger net, because we don't know. I mean, ideally, it's like, well, the question is like, why do we make art? You know what I mean? As queer people, why do we choose to tell the stories that we choose to tell? For me, it's like, it's a cathartic experience. It is weirdly how I deal with my trauma. And my intention isn't to like reach out for another voice and be like, oh my God, I relate to this experience. I know what it's like. But there is nothing more satisfying as an artist to get feedback where it's like, I had a similar experience and I relate to this piece deeper than what it actually is. Like, that is so rewarding, but that's not why I do it. I do it because I feel like I need to, you know? And I guess my question for all of you is like, why do you do the thing that you do? Why are you here? Why are you in the arts? Is it bigger than just you, or is it like something a little more personal? Like, yeah, why do you?
Great.
Okay.
It's a great segue, because I was just going to say that I have 2 questions, and one of them is basically that it's I want to attack. Can I, if I can add to Oscar's question real quick and just say like, maybe in addition to why you do your art, but also what are you currently excited about? I kind of want to attach those two things. What about your particular creativity right at the moment is going on, or top of mind, or etc. But dovetailing on Oscar there, can you talk about the why a little bit?
Someone else go first.
I narrate a lot of audiobooks, but right now I'm sort of writing more than anything. And also, I have sort of decided, well, a little bit of my life is going to be in Portugal now, because I'm a little worried about the world. So I've been trying to figure out how to make things in Portugal, and they have there are a lot of good tax things there. Everybody, I would look into it. If you want to make something, it's like a 30% discount. So yeah, I'm working on, part of that is to sort of make some sort of community so that if we need to, we can be there. My wife, Rebecca Asher, had this great idea that we could do like a training for crew over there, like bring American crews over and do like crew camp, so that there will be like local crews and stuff like that. And in terms of like why I don't know. I always feel I always want to make a team somehow. Even when I'm, even as an actor, I don't just learn my track. I mean, I'm really interested in the whole thing, and the spaces between everybody are electric and more important than any one like point. And so in writing, at least I can sort of try to share, and yeah, that's all. Yeah.
Someone else. Uh-oh.
I'm excited about my episode on June 30th because I've been in the industry for 16 years. And this is my first television role.
The Book of Queer on Discovery.
The Book of Queer on Discovery Plus.
Have Discovery Plus. I will be watching this.
Well, I'll be Josephine Baker, which
Yes!
So rad.
My gosh!
was like so huge, just because for when I was younger, I would watch that movie over and over and over again. And then when I found out she was a bisexual woman, and then the fact that I was playing a bisexual woman that was Black and so amazing. I just thought that would never happen as a queer person, to be able to, I can't believe I'm saying that, to be able to actually play someone in my community, both communities. It's just it's a dream come true, honestly. And my why is because I feel like I don't want to be selfish, but I feel like my why is eternally for my younger self that felt like I was in Ohio. I couldn't, like, I didn't see a world past Ohio, but I knew that there was more out there. Like Holly Berry for me was my first example of someone that got out and just flew. Like, so for me, being from a small town, all my family lives there, and doing something that is not what I grew up with. My parents, they don't give me any credit whatsoever. Somebody got to keep you humble, but my goodness, I'm just proud of just how far life has really taken me, because it feels like it's no longer a dream. This is like a reality of just, and I feel like finally I can see myself actually deserving of this. But to have words be seen on like continents that I've never left North America, like that's insane to me, to be like, oh, your word, something you created is going to be in streaming in UK television in August. Like, what? So I guess my why is having just a dream that's actually being lived out loud.
Beautiful.
So beautiful. That's great. I recently heard this quote. I was watching this spiritual like existential leader, and she was talking about like when we're all on Earth, our goal is the manipulation of time. She's like, that's our ultimate goal, and how we do the manipulation of time is creating. So we create, right? So I'm like, that spoke to me on a lot of levels, like as like I agree with you, Chris. Like it's like when you're an actor and you're like in school, like all I felt like I ever wanted was like people to be like, oh my God, this guy's so talented, I've gotta put him in my project. And then you wait and you wait and you wait, and it's hard to get an agent, it's hard to get an audition, it's hard to get the part. So it's like I think with us creating our own projects is part of that manipulation of time. I think it ties into what you were saying, Ashley. I don't know. There's a part of me that always feels like that was told from such a young age, by the world, that I was wrong and bad for being born, for having the thoughts that I had. So there's a part of me that feels like when I do my creativity, when I'm acting, when I'm writing, when I'm doing stand up, and I'm getting praised and loved for being who I am, it's beyond validating. It's saying that I matter and saying you were wrong. You prejudged by something that you were told, to make yourself feel better. So I think maybe that's part of the reason, like when I heard that woman say that the manipulation of time, I thought that really registered with me, as I I fought creating things for so long. Like I always loved being in improv with a lot of you, because it's that ensemble feeling of not being alone. And I think being gay in a household where you're the only one, I always felt so alone, right? Even you go to school, you're like, trying to find like the other gay kids, somebody to, safety, just to feel safe. And so I just had a lot of fear about using my voice to create. And, for years, all I've ever been told was that I should do stand-up comedy, that I was a comedian. And I just I could never think of anything scarier to do it. And when I've dabbled in it and I've performed it, I've gotten such praise and it felt like it was right, but it's still so scary and fearful. But it's a way for creating something without having to worry about the budget, the grant. Are we going to find a BIPOC director? Are we going to find, where are we going to find queer, all these people to kind of to create it? So I don't know. I don't know what I'm just sharing thoughts.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of stand-up lately as well. So I'm excited about that. I started a podcast about actors called Freelance Pretend that Oscar was our guest on this week.
Oh,
So
cool.
go check
Listen
that
to it.
out.
It's very
Freelance
fun.
pretend. That's my favorite.
I love that phrase. I love that.
This week with Oscar, we talked about dick pics.
Gonna have to listen if I.
Yeah, I think I'm excited about. I've been doing stand up for a long time. I'm excited about my latest go around. I've basically taken 5 or 6 runs at it over the years, and something I'm very excited about with it right now, but also kind of scares me, is that I feel like I'm better at it now than I was before, but I don't know why. So I'm having better sets, and the things that it's almost like I'm sometimes saying things that I said 7 years ago, and now they're funny and they weren't 7 years ago. And so what's a little disconcerting is I'm not sure exactly what the secret is, except, flight hours, as they say. But it's interesting. It's a very exciting thing. And it totally like Joey said, it's a very independent feeling thing to do. Although it is also very intimidating. The social aspects of it are very intimidating to me, in terms of the clicks, and some of this is imagined in my own head, and some of it's not. But encountering, that entire like universe of people that already know each other, a lot of whom are like way younger than me with like way more energy to like do an open mic at 1 a.m. But overall, I would agree with Joey that the ability to like just, I can go right now and go do one if I want to, is something that in itself has value during the pandemic. And I would say like the why for me doing this stuff is, I'm still trying to one is I just love creative problem solving. So I love just like trying to figure out how a joke works or why the scene isn't working. And then I also am always trying to like figure out what for me is like true about the world and trying to say it. I actually think right now there's actually lots of opportunity to say something true about the world that isn't polarized. Because the world is so polarized right now. But like, I think there are things that are true for a lot of people on both sides of a lot of these issues. And I don't know exactly all the time what it is. But it's interesting living in LA because you are in a very advanced form of like political discourse being here, but I'm from Texas. And like, I also have been on Zooms with people from like Wisconsin or Ohio, where like a guy that I got to know through Zoom meetings, working on a project, near the end of it, he like drank from his mug, and his mug it was a Steven Crowder mug, the guy who, I don't even know what he does, but any exposure I've had to the guy has not been good. But this guy who was like a friend of mine was like a Steven Crowder fan. And it was like, oh, like I have to figure out, he's not a person that I want to like kick out of my life, right? Based on that belief. But if I hadn't kind of been tricked into getting to know him over 3 months, I would never have become his friend if I had known that about him first. And so like, I think in that space, I'm interested in like, what can we say in that part of the dialogue, which is interesting to me because it also feels a little bit dangerous right now to like speak into that area, to try to be true, to try to be funny about it, and to also be willing to, that kind of stuff, you will get criticism from both sides probably, but I mean, we're also artists, so we can't necessarily be dictated by that.
I like that idea, Chris, of the concept of saying something that's true, that's not polarizing. Speaking of polarizing, Steven Crowder, I mean, that guy's a former Fox News guy. He's a bigot. He's bad news, that dude, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So that's a real weird thing that you're dealing with someone that you've become friends with or work friends with. Yeah, that's how complicated things can be.
I say break that mug.
Oscar, you initiated this question. It's your fault.
Oh, I will say I have every artistic thing that I have ever done was collaborative. Like starting out, before I did comedy, I was a dancer. I did contemporary dancing, and I did it with an ensemble. I did it with a group. The way we choreographed stuff was collaborative. We didn't have a choreographer. We all sort of shared space. And then transitioning from dancing to improv, that is also collaborative. That's like creating something out of nothing, but we all have a say in what's going on. We all accept each other's ideas and we celebrate each other's ideas, And when I was starting out doing improv, it was a space that I did not feel welcome in. As someone who was queer and then someone who was brown, it was a very, just the optics of it just felt very white and straight to me, and male identifying. So in terms of like accepting my ideas and even like saying yes and to me, I wasn't receiving any of that. And I'm not bullshitting you at all. Chris Grace was one of the people that saw me for who I was and was very supportive of me coming up in the improv world in New York. And I feel like if it wasn't for some like people like Chris or Jess Eason, who was another big voice for me, I would have not done improv. I would have not have continued doing comedy, and I would have been like, this is not for me. I'm leaving. But seeing someone like Chris, who was very well established in the improv, especially where we're doing improv at the People's Improv Theater, again, that idea of hope, right? Like watching someone like Wilson Cruz and someone like Chris Grace just like dominate on stage, I was like, oh, yes, he is the only POC in this team right now. But he's killing it. And like his voice is being celebrated and revered. And I get where he's coming from, you know? And so.
And I was making fun of all the white people.
Exactly, which I love. It's my favorite thing. No, but like having someone like Chris just to be like, I see you, I who am in a bigger position, see you, someone who's like coming up and like very interested in this art form, gave me confidence and hope that I could do this. Like my voice mattered. And it has changed my life.
It's not very hard to see that Oscar is talented, though. So like, it wasn't I was like a Sherlock Holmes.
but I will also say, like, despite that, like, I did feel like I wasn't funny because in a lot of white spaces, like a lot of what I would say in a lot of straight spaces, like people were like, what are you saying? You know what I mean?
Actually, can I speak about that in terms, because this is an improv thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I think one thing that was really unacknowledged from, let's say, 1995 to 2020 was that improv comedy, as taught from the Del Close thing all the way down, is essentially like a white form of comedy. It's like a white dialogue that we could learn to like code switch into, but it was treated as if it was the default. Like, this is comedy. This is just what's funny. It's true in stand-up as well. But, like, in improv specifically, because this has such a social element to it, it was like, this is what is funny. And then it's like when people talk about movies and they're like, well, Tyler Perry movies are this way, right? But they're not default culture or whatever. But I'm like, improv is like white Tyler Perry culture, you know? Like, it's just unacknowledged that, like, we all had to, like, speak that language to, like, be on these teams where it was just us and 7 white people. And I think we became very good at speaking that language, but there were probably things in your improv back then that you either wanted to reference something or you wanted to even like meta reference, like a dynamic or a tone or even someone's voice that for a lot of white audiences would be like, I don't know what he's referring to, so I'm not going to laugh. But if they make another like Jay and Silent Bob reference, I'm going to give them a standing ovation.
The women too were like, just like, okay, well, how am I one of the boys now? I guess I have to be one of the boys.
White male tone for sure.
Yeah, like, I guess the funniest movie I've ever seen is Three Amigos. You know, like
I started doing improv so long ago that like I was lucky and unlucky simultaneously, because I was in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a very liberal place, and I was lucky. It was predominantly white, my groups for years, but we did have a queer culture in our group, and that informed and opened up the eyes of people who otherwise, had they not been part of our group, would have gone on to be one of those, straight white Jay and Silent Bob joke making type of people. But they were informed by osmosis, by being with, a person who they were like, oh, wait, you're gay? I didn't know that gay people could be funny, could be, nice and cool to hang out with, and et cetera. That's interesting. I'm 18 years old and learning what that's like. But then moving to New York and meeting people of color who were like you don't have enough representation in your group, like, and just being informed and being like, oh shit, and sort of shamed in a way, but at the same time being like, look at this world that you've been sort of oblivious to, of references and tone and types of humor and et cetera.
I think also to your point too, like when I was starting out, the norm, especially when I would go see house teams perform, it would be comprised of 5 cis, straight, white presenting males, 2 women.
Mhm.
For some reason, that was like the rule. It's like 2 women for every team, and then maybe 1 POC, and that could be whatever variety flavor of POC they had. And to me, watching it, not familiar with improv or anything, I thought that was the rule. I was like, okay, so a house team consists of 7 white voices and 1 POC, and 2 of those voices are female. And that's just the rule. And that's been the rule for the longest time. And I didn't think I was allowed to be on a team with another POC, you know?
Wow.
And I wasn't on a team, another house team, until I moved to LA, and I was on my very first house team, Herald team at UCB called Nomi Malone, where I was with Kirby Hal Baptiste. And we were both like, we're both POC, we're on the same house team. What the? And we were so overjoyed because it was like, oh my gosh, it's like outside of that political sort of like, okay, every team consists of this. And the sake was for diversity, but what you're doing is you're limiting, you're like encapsulating it. It's sort of just like calcifying these like weird rules that aren't rules at all. Now there's a little bit more diversity in teams, but like, it was very strange to see that homogenized everywhere
Also,
in every comedy theater.
What year is that?
When I got on Local 154 in 2011.
Okay, but when year is Nomi Malone?
2015.
So like that's not
That's not that long.
Unbelievable.
It had for years the effect of diluting voices instead of supercharging and making people's voices stronger.
Yeah, I mean it definitely also put everybody in these like I'm being ganged up on situations, and like in
well, then all of a sudden
in every rehearsal room in this complex, there's a person of color being ganged up on in their rehearsal.
And not just that, Chris, to add on to that, it was like I'm suddenly the voice of all POC. I'm the voice of all queer people. People come to see, and this was imagined in my head, but I saw POC people in the audience, and then suddenly I was like, I have to be funny for these people, because if I'm not funny, then they're gonna be like, oh, that brown kid was not funny. It's whatever, that sucks, And then there's this added pressure, and it's very bizarre. I for the white cis straight men, like they didn't have that. They didn't have that thing of like, I'm the voice of the white straight cis males,
Yeah. But you got to do shows with your people like you at Del Close Marathon once a year.
At 4:00 in the morning for 10 minutes.
That should have been enough.
Sure.
Ashley,
Yeah.
Ashley had to jump off because we're getting into overtime, but I do want to go around. I ask guests if you have advice and counsel for people who are coming up, artists, creators of any type. It might be somebody who's young, but it also might be somebody who isn't young. Do you have thoughts, encouragement? I mean, just hearing your stories is encouraging, but do you have anything particularly that you would sort of like to say to anyone?
Well, I'll start because this is really advice for myself, which is to respond to failures with more energy. So I have a tendency to like, if I'm up for something and then they don't call me, that I kind of am like, ugh, oh well, I guess they didn't want me. And then I go into a little like funk. And I'm going to try to, when that happens, be like, okay, but I have 2 other things I'm going to work on instead. So I don't know if this advice works. I'm just giving it to everybody.
No, that's great though. That's
I'm gonna try to take that.
I need that advice. I respond to failure with more energy, or respond to perceived failure with more energy.
Yeah.
I think to add on to that, my advice is don't attach your self-worth to this business. You are more, you are not what you do. Like I think for us as creatives that are trying to make this into a lucrative business, a lot of times our self-worth is attached to what jobs we book, what things we get, what roles we go out for. And when we don't do it, then we are bad people because we didn't book this job, you know? What we do financially for money is not who we are as creatives. Our creative idea isn't like sullied by Big Brother, by the capitalist monster that is this business, you know? So always be creating for yourself, always be fulfilling your soul as an artist, and then try to find a healthy way to deal with the financial aspects of this business, you know?
Terrific.
Yeah. I realized quite a ways into my life and career, I was like, what is this feeling like when I didn't get something, or and or just feeling like I had a bad audition or something. It's like, what is this feeling? Because it was a very complicated feeling. And the feeling was shame. Like such shame. Like,
Wow, that's so
like there's I am, I was like, that's fucked up. So like you really do have to separate who you are from this craziness. That is absolutely true. And then I think something about sort of like what Chris was saying, tell the truth in whatever imaginary circumstances and whatever untruths are sort of the underpinnings of the world. Tell the truth, because that will never not be fulfilling. Like you can always find worth in that.
Yeah, and I want to just tag onto that, which is this idea of like, tell the truth. Right now in our creative culture, I think there's a very strong trend to deal in tropes and memes and quoting others and stuff like that. And I think there's space to like just say what you want to say, find your way to say it that isn't necessarily a reference to some other thing that has been accepted as true already.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for my advice, I would say to create, like to get whatever that means for you. I think a lot of the times it starts with written word on the page, whether it's doing stand-up or writing a screenplay or a poem or whatever that is your truth, then create and write, because there's something in writing that gives you a voice, that gives you value in that voice. And when you put it out there and you get other people hearing it, and there's a recognition so that you can hold somebody else's hand, I feel like it's really important. Like nobody wants to go through life alone. Even when you want to have your alone time, when you come back out, it's so important to have an ally, to have some support. So I would say, look for support and also be somebody else's support, to live a bigger life than this industry, than just creating and feeling like you always have to write that screenplay or create. I would say the biggest way to live a bigger life is to travel. I mean, I've been to Portugal. I love that country. I'm excited for you. Lisbon's
Come to Portugal, everybody.
Yeah. And, travel the world, because you'll see how things are different in different places, right? You'll see that they, like Chris will tell you, they don't care about masks in England. But, and then the last piece of advice I would say is to lean into everything that you dislike about yourself. Because I found, for me personally, everything that I ended up hating about myself were things that I was told by other people, right? You're too feminine, you're too brown, you have a big nose, and you start to hear those things from other people. And I started internalizing that hate about myself. And I think in the way to owning that is to really like lean into it and celebrate it. I do have brown skin, I do have a big nose, and I may be too feminine for you, and I'm going to own it all.
Wow.
Can I add one more thing? One more thing.
Of course.
Surround yourself with beauty. Have the outside around you feed you too. So buy yourself flowers. Like it while you're create something lovely and meaningless just because you can and because it brings joy. Just bring joy wherever you can.
Of that too. Y'all, it was an absolute delight and honor to have you on as our panel. I'm sorry Ashley isn't here for this
How
moment.
do we be friends?
How do we be
How do we be
we'll
friends?
share,
Yeah, I want to be friends with that.
we'll share all of our contact information after the recording.
All right.
Oscar Montoya, Chris Grace, Joy Rich, Rebecca Lohmann, and Ashley Shine, thank you all for being on the show with me. It was really just a joy. And I really appreciate you all making time for this. And thank you.
Mike, I want to thank you for holding space for this conversation and just getting it in under the wire for Pride Month.
Yeah.
We'll
Proud of you.
take it any time we can get it.
Although it does.
This will be released Pride Month next year, though, right?
It does
I better
air.
edit this.
It does first air or whatever on our YouTube channel on Saturday, which is July.
July 1st. Yeah.
Mike, first, don't you have to edit out all the gay stuff before you can air this?
Oh, yeah. I have to whitewash this whole thing and straighten it. You know,
It'll be 10 minutes.
possible.
Yeah.
Pride Roundtable, a retrospective.
Before they all had to move to Portugal.
Bye.
Thank
Had
you
to
for watching,
move.
for listening, and we'll see you next time. It says we're recording, so that means we're recording. And
I've always fucking hated Mike Rock.
well, that's fair enough. Okay. We're ready. We are rolling.
You're gonna want to leave that in.
I'm enjoying some of Chris's tea. All right.
Oh, here we go. Pride Month. Mike trying to talk our lingo.
Oh man, I knew it was going to be like this, but I went forward anyway.